You probably know the feeling. Sweaty, fast breathing, quick heart rate. That's a cortisol spike. It feels awful, and its imbalance is the cause of your anxiety. Rebalance Health's 3-part anxiety system helps address it at the root. Rebalance Health lozenges are natural and designed for optimal absorption, providing 24-hour relief. Live life fully without feeling like you're fighting for it. Get 50% off your first month with code CALM23 at rebalancehealth.com.
Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.
Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Join us as we seek the truth and travel the long road to justice. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi Fruit Loop. What you know?
Did you know that the Goodyear blimp is the official bird of Redondo Beach? It says, while it may not be a bird, the coastal city still named it as such. And it's situated near the Goodyear blimp's home airport in California.
Oh, so it's all about merchandising.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So real quick before we get started, we want to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Too Cool T-Shirt Quilts. You can go to toocooltshirtquilts.com/pretty lies and alibis. They'll know we sent you. So Fruit Loop, I didn't realize this, but Monday was our 300th episode.
That's crazy, right?
That is insane to think. Yeah. So you got somebody to thank.
Yeah. So Detective Doug sent us some cool police coins. They were really neat, very pretty. So we thank you, Detective Doug.
Yeah, that's so nice of you to think of us. And I haven't seen Fruit Loop since she's got them, but I'm going to put it up here in the studio. We'll take a picture and put it out on social media. Big thank you also to Gina for the PayPal donation. We really, really appreciate you. So yesterday we missed an episode.
Yeah.
Because, it wouldn't be a day in the life of Gigi without some catastrophe, right? So I am literally drying my hair, getting ready to do our episode last night. And my daughter walks in and she literally looks like the character Carrie. There's just blood pouring from her face. So I realized she, last week she had that little procedure where they cauterized one side of her nose. This is from the other side. And I'm going to tell you, this is the worst nosebleed she's had in her whole life. Yeah. After 10 minutes of not getting it to stop, I got one phone calling the ENT. I've got the other phone calling my mom to help because at my house, Fruit Loop, if you were to spray luminol in here, it would look like a crime scene.
Uh-oh. You in trouble.
So finally, I'm on the phone with the ENT. My daughter's like, I feel dizzy. She's cold and shaky. We're about to call 911. So the ENT said, wait, get some Afrin. This is a hack, you guys. Some of you know about it. Some of you don't. If you have a nosebleed that doesn't stop, get a bottle of Afrin and spray like half of the bottle. Don't suck it up like you need to do with your little sinus infection, by the way.
Oh, I know, right?
You just let it kind of go up in the nose and drain out, and it's a vasoconstrictor. So it stopped the bleeding long enough for us to make it to the ER. In all, she bled 20 minutes solid, lost like a pint of blood. And to make matters worse, she swallowed blood for 20 minutes. So you can imagine what happened in my car as soon as we pulled into the
oh no.
And it baked in the hot sun, 97 degrees for the 3.5-4 hours we were in there. It's been but she's got to have another little procedure on the other side. But I'm telling you, it is the most scared I've been as a mom my whole life because we couldn't get it to stop.
Not cool. I figured out why I have a sinus infection.
Well, why is that?
Okay, so, we went to Dollywood this weekend. Had a blast. Cool place to be. So I'm standing in line because I get a jazzy because, I'm still nursing my foot.
Mm-hmm.
A bee stings me 3 times in the neck.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm allergic. So I'm thinking I'm going to have that Martin Short, when he's in that helicopter or whatever.
Oh, that's so funny, yeah.
Where he swells up. So I go get Benadryl, and every time I take Benadryl, I get a sinus infection, and I didn't know why.
That's weird because usually it clears you up a little bit.
Well, I researched today because I was like, something's got to give. And I researched, and it says Benadryl thickens, and this is gross, but thickens mucus. So that's why you get a sinus infection when you take Benadryl. And I was
Wow. Dang. Because I talked to you on the phone earlier and I was like, are you holding your nose or something?
no, I still
Oh,
not
man.
very
So
well.
just crazy, crazy, crazy.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump back in. We're going to do double tonight because we missed yesterday. And I have to say, you know, reviewing all 1,700 pages of these custody documents, you see how consuming this custody battle was.
Yeah, it was ugly.
Oh, man. Sometimes Lori literally filed motions every other day that Joe had to respond to.
Tons of money.
At this point, Tylee's 5. She's been through so many psychologists, professionals, that kind of thing. God knows what Lori was putting her through. And, you know, at the end of the day, Joe is just trying to see his daughter. It's just really, you really do forget all these little tiny things that, you know, get lost over the years. So we're going to jump right back in. May 20th. Well, when we left off, they were going to recommend that Joe get overnights with a chaperone because at this point there was no decision on the allegations of molestation, that kind of thing. So May 23rd, 2007, Joe Ryan is actually arrested after Lori said he hit her in the courtroom or in the hallway of the courthouse. I'm sorry. Yep. When we talked to Tom Ware, he told us that Joe like elbowed her and she made a huge stink about it and had him arrested. Just one of those things, probably if I can get him arrested, I can get Tylee.
Yep.
So the case was dismissed on March 31st of 2008. So why don't you pick up here?
All right. So Tom had brought on a child therapist, Miss Rodriguez, to see Tylee, and they had several visits.
Girl, apparently that Benadryl made your tongue thick too.
I know, right? Several visits, with the last one being towards the end of May. She said Tylee was avoidant when talking about Joe and showed anxiety around the topic. She would say she didn't want to talk about issues with her dad or the sexual abuse allegations.
Well, if you think about it, you know, the opinion was always that Tylee was coached. And I think that there's probably at this age such a stress. Tylee's probably afraid she might say something wrong and get in trouble with her mom. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't even imagine at 5 years old what this kid's going through.
Yeah, no. And at that age, you want to make your parents happy, and you know what I mean?
So, and not only that, but she's living with Lori full time. So we don't know the wrath maybe that Tylee suffered if she didn't perform the way that Lori wanted her to.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. So the therapist said she had reviewed the report where Tylee was given an internal examination. And most likely that was to check for sexual abuse. In June, Tom Ware submits a report to the court where he had met Lori and Tylee, who we've said is 5 at this point, at a park for about 30 minutes. He said the meeting was quite pleasant. Tylee didn't want to leave Lori's side, even though Lori was telling her to go play. Tom also mentions in the report he only has permission to interview Tylee about the allegations, even though they also involve Colby.
Right.
Yeah. He asked the court to give him access to Colby. He told us that Colby was never formally adopted by Joe, and if he had been, he would have automatically been included. We will get into this statement about that in a minute or two. But so there's a motion by Lori to remove the guardian ad litem, who was Tom Ware. It says he has shown a lack of objectivity. He has mischaracterized the statements of persons with significant knowledge of the child's history and conditions. He's made false statements to persons with significant knowledge of the child's history, influenced their statements, and refused to let persons with significant knowledge of the child's history give free statements. So, you want to pick up there?
Yeah, and they also said that he failed to interview Tylee in a reasonable amount of time, failed to interview people with significant knowledge of the child's history. I think I just said that. Sorry, y'all. Um, Failed to review Tylee's psychological medical records and so on. So May 24th, 2007, there's a filing for a motion of contempt and sanctions. So what happens here, and those of you who have been following this case for a very long time and were part of the Facebook groups from really early on, you remember there was a lot of allegations about Tom Ware, about he was willing to change his testimony to stay on the case, that they were drinking and all this stuff. We talked to Tom, all that was hogwash. But here's kind of the backstory on that. Lori's lawyer calls Tom Ware's attorney, and the attorney suggests that Tom Ware, who's at that time is Tylee's guardian ad litem, changes testimony about the opinion of Tylee in the case. That was the opinion that Tylee should go live with Joe in exchange for Lori withdrawing her motion to remove him as Tylee's guardian. But what Tom didn't know is at this point, Lori's attorney's taping the conversation. So they talk about Vivian Lewis. We've talked about her in the past episode. She's really experienced sex therapist. Remember, she was the one that made the recommendation that Tylee should be placed with Joe. Tom Ware agreed, and Tom was going to go along with what Vivian said. So, on the tape, I think what was played for the judge maybe sounded like Tom Ware said he would change his testimony. He explains that to us, and we'll get to that soon. So we talked to Tom in April of last year, and we were the first people that he reached out to publicly to tell his side of the story.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting to his interview. But the next morning, Tom's attorney passes and asks Lori's attorney if they have a deal, and Lori's attorney says no. So on June 4th, 2007, there's an email sent to all the attorneys in the case about Vivian Lewis being removed, saying she hasn't produced the test results for Joe. Tom Ware says he knows people are questioning her competency, but maybe they can consider some of her work reliable and some of it not. In the end, both sides agree to get another expert to replace Vivian, which is a nightmare because that's more trauma for Tylee.
Yep.
That's a new court date. That's money. That's pushing this back in the system. So on July 30th, 2007, Tom Ware leaves the case. He's not replaced. Mary Fogel is put in his place. The next day, Lori asks for a jury trial about the issue. So let's talk about Tom Ware, because he specifically called me out because I said it sounded like there were shenanigans going on, and there wasn't. They were meeting after work for a couple of drinks in a social capacity. Online, It really kind of sounded like they were all just, at the expense of Tylee screwing all this up. So let's talk about what Tom said when he called us. And that conversation was almost, 4 hours?
It was long. Yeah, it was long.
Not only that, the thing to remember is that Tom Ware and Vivian both had just very recently, as of April last year, found out about this whole case.
Yep. They didn't know anything about it. So there was a lot of misinformation, like we said. It was being spread online, and he wanted to clear all that up, was why he reached out to us. I think we both feel he had Tylee's best interest at heart.
100%.
Yeah, he didn't know about Tylee and JJ, like we just said, being missing or anything. So he said this case is just layer upon layer upon layer. He said he held a lot of investigations. I actually have, this is what he said. He had 56 typed pages of single space pages worth of notes. In this case, they are extremely detailed of who I talked to, phone numbers, even what I was thinking and what I was trying to get to. I'm able to remember pretty much all these little different nuances and parts of this case. It's all documented, and he said he had it.
Yeah.
So many months ago, he saw something on TV, and it was actually Lori, but he didn't realize it was Lori at the time. He made a kind of a mental note to himself because he couldn't remember names or any of that, but he said that she looked familiar. And he said maybe it was that crazy case I had back in 2007, but he said he just put it in the back of his mind and didn't think much about it. So at the time when he talked to us, he said about a month ago, he decided he needed to start getting rid of some files because he needed space in the garage. So he started grabbing files and shredding them, and he got to this case, and he said, I didn't really look at the case, and I've already shredded about 3/4 of the file and at least one of the files, but he did have a second set. So you want to pick up here?
Yeah. So at that point, he calls Vivian Lewis, and she hadn't heard anything about the case. She was floored over the whole thing, and she just didn't know that at that point, JJ and Tylee were missing. Lori's in Hawaii, all that. He said, we tried to tell them back then that Lori was a danger to the kids. And he said, you already know this case is crazy. When I first discovered all this, I went through a lot of YouTube videos, and I'm thinking, where's Joe? Why doesn't Joe say something about this? Because he'd be all over this. And then I found out he's dead. Then I found out Charles is dead. Everybody is dying in this case. We're going to break here for a moment to do our sponsored ad for the week. I want to say real quick that this was never meant to be a back and forth interview where he's on, we're on. I know that when we originally did this last year, people thought that was the case. No, this was never meant to be a sit down back and forth interview. It was more of, I'm going to tell you what happened. Please tell my story. Because at that point they went on to do Dateline, I believe. Both Tom and Vivian were on Dateline later on last year. All right. But real quick, we're going to get back into this. But first, this Athletic Green stuff that's like awesome. This partner has a product that I use every day now, and I'm not even kidding y'all. I started taking AG1 because I wanted to boost my immune system and start to build up a better overall gut health. And Athletic Greens is something I use every day as part of my health routine.
So AG1 definitely promotes better health. Athletic Greens was created when the founder experienced a ton of gut health issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine to recover. It cost him $100 a day. He created Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal nutrition routine on our own. So, Gigi, what is this stuff?
Well, with just one scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food-sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. And I'll tell you, I just literally this weekend started feeling so much better. Just every day you start feeling a little bit better, a little bit stronger. I eat like crap. I don't eat very much either, 1 meal a day. So, and then like last night at the hospital, I had it and I was able to eat or drink my AG1 while I was sitting there with Sarah Rose. It was really easy.
That's awesome. So that is exactly why Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews and is recommended by professional athletes. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. Or you can mix it. I mix it with my smoothie. I make a smoothie out of it. Mm-hmm. So there's no need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health.
So to make it easy for our listeners, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Those are super convenient. Yes. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/whattheworld. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/whattheworld to take ownership over your health and pick the ultimate daily nutrition insurance. We're going to put that link in the description on YouTube as well. So back to our case. So Tom says from the start, I was appointed guardian ad litem. Now, in this particular situation, I was in private practice at the time, which will make sense to you when we start talking more about Mary Fogle and all that, because she's public. Tom was private.
Yeah.
Mary Fogle is with Travis County Domestic Relations Office, and he said he knew Mary quite well because he used to work with her, and he worked 5 years at the Domestic Relations Office as guardian ad litem and then decided to go into private practice. He said that this case came between Lori and Joe at the end of his career for various reasons, but he's been doing this type of work for about 20 years. His background is that he's a mental health professional. He has a master's degree in counseling, and he's been in the mental health field the entire time. The first visit he actually had was with Joe. He said, of course, Joe denied all of the sex abuse allegations, and he had confirmed that Lori was being abusive, more particularly to Colby at the time. And in fact, Joe gave an example about Lori punching Colby straight in the chest when he asked to go with Joe to the store to get some ice cream.
So Lori had a sister who died, and we've covered that. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. And she believed Tylee was her sister who had been reincarnated. So there was already some strangeness. Her effect was really off, and most people were kind of upset and sad that their kids may have been abused. And he said she seemed to be just the opposite. She was happy that all this happened. So he says he started investigating the case. The abuse allegations as far as Tylee, we never thought that she was abused. The main allegations that Tylee made one is that Dad crashes into me, which he said they could never figure it out. And remember, she was only 4 at the time. So he brings on Vivian Lewis to the case, and she's been doing this for years and years and years. She's published. She's not a psychologist. She's a registered sex offender provider, and essentially what that means is that her specialty is sex offenses treatment for an assessment. But he said she's probably the best sex therapist in Austin, if not in the state, and probably she's nationally renowned. She's done work for the military. She's published papers. He just said she's top notch in her field. And it turned out that apparently Joe and Lori had also seen Vivian even before this case started. So Vivian has a vague recollection of these two, but they agreed to go ahead and continue with her and to do this assessment and all that. So Vivian starts interviewing the kids, but something happens during this event, and Vivian becomes sick.
Yeah. And so Tom explained to us some of the things that was going on with her, but out of respect for Vivian and not to reveal sensitive information, she just had some major health issues during Tylee's case. When we originally did the Tom Ware series, we mistakenly said it was cancer. He corrected us and said it was not cancer. But nonetheless, she was super sick. And so there was a lot of talk also that there was possibly something going on at the time between Lori and her attorney. And that was said in circles, in the legal circles, and people allegedly surrounding this case. We don't have a dog in this fight. But Tom says while Vivian is sick, she's supposed to come up with this final report on Joe. She doesn't have the report, and the court put a mandate that the judge put a gag order saying that Vivian is to disclose to nobody what her final outcome of the case was in her assessment. And honestly, she did abide by that, although her and Tom would still have talks and they would discuss the case together. But she never told Tom what her final recommendation was. At the time she finally gets this report finished, and she had missed appointments with Lori. She makes these appointments and just doesn't show up. And Tom knows something's just not right with her. It's just not like her. But he says they get to the point to where she's ready to file the report. But before she files the report, she has a big concern. If she files the report, and Tom said if Lori gets her little hands on it, she's going to take off with the kids. That was their fear. Yep. She was going to leave. So Vivian didn't want to make the report public or give it to the parties without first talking to the judge. The request and ultimately her recommendation was going to be that Tylee be placed in the custody of Joe.
Yeah. So at this point, to keep Lori from running off with the kids, they have an ex parte hearing, a hearing with the judge. And he said he thinks the judge called him on the phone, just asked me and told me the same thing. Vivian was saying that there is a good possibility she could run with the kids. And he said, I do believe she's a danger to those kids. So at that point, the judge orders that Tylee move to Joe's house. And that's before the report hits everybody's hands. So an order that is issued ex parte means that it is issued without prior notice to the other parent, based only on your affidavit and testimony. So if the judge issues an emergency ex parte order, the judge will schedule a hearing within 14 days, and the respondent must be served at least 5 days before that hearing.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're going to do something ex parte, you got to have a hearing behind all that. You just can't move children from one household to the other. by just one party going to the judge and saying, hey, judge, I think there's a problem. You got to have a hearing. And he says he was quite settled on the whole thing about Joe. Tylee going over to Joe's, he said he's fine with all that. He agrees with Vivian. And in hindsight, I may have done it just a little bit differently. He said he maybe would have had some visitations with Lori. He may not have wanted to do it quite so abruptly, but I could get behind that. That's what he said.
Yeah. So he says, so we come to the day of the hearing and Vivian doesn't show up to the court hearing. So they've got this big court hearing where they're supposed to decide and prove Vivian's report and her recommendation that Tylee be moved over to Joe's house. But Vivian's not there to testify. So the only person left is Tom Ware. So he made the recommendation that coincided with Vivian's decision that Tylee should go to Joe's house. After he did that, he said literally he literally said that's when the poop hit the fan.
Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
That's where all the drinking stuff comes into play that was floating around online. And he said, and what John told him during the first visit that he had with him, John was Lori's attorney at the time.
Yeah.
They filed the motion to recuse Tom as the guardian at this point because they were saying you made a recommendation on what someone else had said and at a point where Tom had not talked to Tylee. So you see how they've done all this back work. Yep. They're going to go with Joe. They know what's up with Lori. They pegged her in 2007 for who she was. Tom and Vivian had her pegged, but unfortunately Vivian's sick. So Tom said he didn't want to talk to Tylee about anything related to the case until Vivian got finished with her, that he wanted to have a fresh start. He wanted Vivian to be able to talk with Tylee without any influence of something that Tom might say because he knew it would come back on him anyway. And he said, I was exactly correct on that because during that hearing, I mentioned some of the people I spoke to, several witnesses, that kind of thing. And sure enough, during that hearing, they start complaining that I tried to persuade these witnesses into saying certain things or that I bullied them and I did this and that. He said he didn't. He just talked to them and got what they had to say. There was no bullying or trying to persuade them, but supposedly they're saying he did this.
Well,
he said there.
You think about it. I mean, a guardian at Litem, you're there for the kid.
Right.
Like you're there for the kid. You're there to see what's going on. You ask questions. Like you're there for the kid. It's not guardian Litems don't make up stuff.
And they don't just rule because they don't like a certain parent. They have their stuff backed up. They have documentation to support their recommendations. But then with Vivian not showing up, Lori and her lawyer saw it as attack, like get what they want. And like Tom said, if I talked to Tylee, I would have got creamed. If I didn't talk to Tylee, I got creamed. What can I do? But he said in his mind, he preserved what Tylee had to say without any influence from him. He said, so they couldn't come back and say that he put anything in Tylee's head. They filed a motion to remove him, and it's mostly because he had not seen Tylee, and he made the recommendation to the court that Tylee should go with Joe based on what Vivian was going to rule anyway. So what did he do?
So I thought this is crazy. He had to do this, but so he hired an attorney to fight the removal. And he said that's a little bit on the unusual side, but he said, I'm not afforded an attorney in court. So he explained that when he was with Travis County, we always had a county attorney come to court with us on any kind of motion to remove the guardian. And what Judge Livingston explained was that because the county has overall responsibility and authority in all this, They have their own side to this that they can provide you an attorney. But he was in private practice, and you can't have your own attorney. You have your attorney that you can consult with, but that attorney isn't there to question people or do stuff with you with people on the stand during the actual court hearing. So neither him nor his attorney knew that.
Right. So he goes on to say that Vivian not showing up for the first hearing got him into all kinds of trouble. So he's trying to reach out to Vivian. He's making phone calls. He's leaving messages, emailing her. He said he even sent a fax over there. He doesn't hear from her. So a day before the motion to remove him as guardian, he goes over to her house, and she lives just outside of Austin in another city. He said he goes up to the door and she's not home. He said, but if he remembers correctly, her daughter was home, and he told the daughter, listen, you got to have Vivian at this hearing tomorrow because all these problems are happening because she isn't showing up for these court appearances. So with all these different measures he put into place to make sure she showed up to that hearing where they're wanting to remove him as the guardian. So what happens, Fruit Loop?
So Vivian doesn't show up. So these are 2 hearings now that Vivian has missed. Both of them are highly crucial hearings, especially on the second one where they're trying to get rid of the child's advocate. So at that point, he's just mad. He's fit to be tied. And with this, he's saying, he doesn't understand what's wrong with her. But nonetheless, he had confidence in her evaluation and her assessment of the case. Everything gelled really well with the other reports he was getting.
Yeah, he was having conversations with her throughout this whole process. So he knew what was going on and knew these were very straightforward conversations about what was going on with Tylee. So he was really confident in her recommendation. He said where he lost confidence in her is that she's not showing up for the meetings or the hearings. And he let us know it really pained him because she was just such a good person, but she was just super sick. So he said, this is the beginning of a big problem. And so now Lori's attorney, John Hindera, wants to get rid of the both of them. And Tom says he put up a heck of a fight and he was successful. He said the judge didn't take him off the case. And every time he hears folks say he was removed, he said, I was not removed off that case. The reason he got off the case is that everybody ran out of money, and he's in private practice and he charges $100 an hour to do this work. Everybody's retainer, Joe's and Lori's both, they're gone.
Yeah.
He spent $1,000 or more of his own money to get his own attorney to defend himself in that case. So he said that's the reason he was off the case. It wasn't that he was removed or punished. He wasn't getting paid. He said if he went to the Public County Domestic Relations Office for a public guardian ad litem, they'll do the entire case for like $1,200 and you're done.
Yeah. So Lori's attorney was wanting to continue, but like we said, he couldn't pay for both sides of this, and he was pretty much broke at that point. So Lori, with all this stuff going on, she sure wasn't going to pay him anything. And he said, I think the judge had even ordered them to pay, but because their retainer money was gone, I never got anything out of Lori.
Right. And we just said before, the one thing he made really clear to us is that Joe never formally adopted Colby. He said he would have been part of the custody battle with Tylee, and he would have had access to Colby just as much, but he only had access to Tylee. Yeah. So there were some allegations that he offered to change his testimony.
He said we had the hearing and the judge delays on what she wants to do in between time. And he said, let me be clear, there is no changing my testimony. I continued throughout this entire case to say what I've said. He never thought this happened. I thought this was really a bunch of lies and that Lori was coaching those kids. And he never wavered from that assertion. What he wanted to do instead of John Hindera wiping out both the sex therapist and the guardian ad litem was to swoop first. He said Vivian had already let us down on multiple occasions, and he couldn't talk to her. He couldn't get her on the phone. She's late on her stuff. She's not showing up for meetings. So at this point, the plan was to get an agreement between the parties that if you have a problem with Vivian, that he said, I understand that can cause big problems here. And he said he loves Vivian. He said he really did. And it really hurt him to talk like this about Vivian. And he said he admired her, that she's just like this huge expert. So he said, it's not that I had any ill wishes towards her. In fact, I was quite concerned about her, but I can't have her messing up this case like this. So the whole idea was for the attorneys to come up with a deal, and Joe was on board with this.
Yep. So the plan was to come to an agreement that they would release Vivian from the case and not drag her through all these other hearings and all these other things about her competency. So he said, let's get her off the case, and perhaps there might be something we can salvage out of her report so they don't have to start back from ground zero. Yeah. He said, I know we can come up with some kind of an agreement. He said that we have another psychologist or sex therapist just review her work, which is kind of where Tom was going with this, to make sure everything in Vivian's report that the new person agrees with kind of stays in place, because she had done all of this back work. But in exchange that they keep him on board. So John records the conversation and then goes to court saying that my attorney tried to bribe John, and that was not the case. Tom said he wanted to come to some agreement as to how they can deal with it and still keep the child's advocate on the case who knows everything from the beginning to where they are now. So he said that's where all that come into place. It was twisted to the place where he's trying to bribe Lori's attorney. He said, I'm just trying to salvage a case that is going down the tubes because we've got somebody who's sick. When in fact, we all make these kind of deals all the time. It's very common in what they do. Vivi and I are the main crux of this case. So why destroy the entire case because she's sick? Yeah. Vivian can't deal. None of us can deal with this. I go ahead and agree to that. He said, then let's move on and we find someone else to do all this and we go from there. But just to give you an idea of how full of litigation this was, he said that his attorney had to end up hiring an attorney.
It's crazy.
And in order to deal with this issue, which he ended up having to pay at least a good portion out of his own pocket. So we asked him a question.
Do you think Lori controlled a lot of those strings with her attorney? And he said, yeah, well, I think Lori did. Yes. But the attorney that she had, he had him on several other cases. And yes, we were going to meet at a restaurant and have some drinks, and he's known him for quite some time. We've had several cases together, and as long as I agreed with him, he was someone I could tend to work with up to this point. His boundaries are all messed up, and so he's aggressive to the point where it doesn't even really make sense to be that kind of aggressive. Most attorneys would set boundaries with their clients, and they wouldn't put their clients on the stand knowing that they're about to tell a bunch of lies, which I believe he did, and then cover for them. But it was a combination between Lori and John scheming at the expense of the kids. And they're messing everything up, and that now gives me a good setup into this next part of the case.
So we talk about the allegations of sexual abuse with Tylee, and the statement crashing into me is something that Tylee told them. And he said, it doesn't sound like abuse. And Vivian went through the whole thing. Has anyone touched you where your bathing suit is, and the whole thing? And all that came back as negative. He said, as far as Joe goes, John, Lord have mercy. Joe came off as a regular guy. He said, after one or two sessions with somebody, you can figure out whether there's something not to like with that person. And he never felt that way with Joe. Joe came off as a regular person, which he said is somewhat unusual in their line of work. He said it's just not always the case in his cases. And in the past, he seemed to have a really genuine concern for Tylee and for Colby. And in fact, Joe would like to have adopted Colby if given the chance. But he said they talked about it, and they both knew it just wasn't going to happen with everything going on. He said he did know that Joe had a temper issue, and I think it was probably still within somewhat of normal limits, he said. But he would have some occasional episodes of blowing up. And he tells the story of how, I think Annie Cushing also told the story how Joe had everybody over for Thanksgiving and the roof leaked or something. And Joe exploded. He got in his car, peeled off in front of the kids. He said that Joe tended to be the disciplinarian of the family, and Child Protective Services went with the same thinking, that they felt like Tylee was being coached. At one point during the interview with CPS, Tylee just blurts out, "See, Mama, I told them what you told me to say." And none of them thought that any of it was true.
Yeah.
So Joe was given visitation over at the Kids Exchange. That's where you go exchange kids when you can't trust the parents to do the right thing. And Alex comes to that. We're going to talk about this in detail in the next episode, meets Joe afterwards, and then uses the stun gun on him. Joe believes that Alex is trying to kill him, and Tom said, yeah, I think he probably was.
Yeah.
We're almost done, guys. This is a longer one, but we really wanted to get through this Tom Ware stuff in one episode because it's just very important.
Yep. So there was another event that happened early in the case, which at the time he says he didn't put a lot of stock into but he does now. About a month or two into the case, he got a call from Joe saying that someone's been over in my house. Someone's been going through my stuff. And what happened is that Joe went to a hearing. And one of our hearings, and during that hearing, after he came back from the hearing, all his stuff had been rifled through. And he says, I can't say for absolutely sure that someone was in the house, but it sure seems like it because I had my papers on this pile. I had my computers going. They were just fine. Now they're all blue screened as though someone's been in it. And I had to reboot both computers. And the door isn't the same way that I left it. And he said we debated at that point.
You know, you think about it, like when Joe Ryan died and they showed those pictures from inside his apartment and he had that extra deadbolt. And I think probably between Alex and maybe this, thinking somebody's in his house, no wonder the guy was worried for his safety.
Yeah, I think there was like 3 on the door.
Yeah, there were a lot.
Yeah, yep.
So go ahead.
He says, in fact, I told him just call the police is what Tom Ware told him and let them make a report. And he says he don't think he ever did. But he said that's just another little part of this whole puzzle that no one else knows. And he said that was in Texas in 2007.
Mm-hmm. So then Lori moves to Arizona, and Tom specifically calls Mary Fogle and went through the whole thing pretty much like he did with us, told her what happened. Vivian explained her side to Mary Fogle, and Tom said he definitely believes, like Vivian saying, it's just he can't rely on her, and that's going to be a big problem. So during one of the hearings, and he doesn't remember which one it was, kind of later on in the case, after the hearing, he thinks where Joe elbowed Lori way back in 2007, and she had him arrested, they filed charges on him, and that's what those charges were about. But he said by the time the whole sex abuse thing was already over, what the issue was that Joe assaulted Lori in the courthouse, and that was still pending at the time of the trial to establish custody, and also right there, the grand jury that heard the abuse case. We'll get into that in the next episode too. That's all still pending. Not that there was abuse, but because of the supposed assault, you know, then that kind of muddies up the waters a bit. And he said he's had this stuff happen in other cases, but knowing Lori, it was just made into so much more. And he didn't put a lot of stock into the allegation that he hit her.
Yeah. So he says that, you know, he really felt bad for Joe because honestly, he was fighting to see his kid. And he thinks at the beginning, he was saying he was okay with Lori keeping custody. And he said, I think if I remember right, it was later on where he said, no, something's wrong. But at the beginning, he said, I want to see my kid. It's okay. He was saying it's okay. Lori has her, but I want to be able to see her. So because he recognized that Tylee had a relationship with her mother, he did not want to take that away from her. But considering all these other things that have happened, Lori's going out of her way to destroy Joe's relationship with her.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, Joe believed that the reason why they were doing all this was 2 reasons. One, that Lori wanted Joe out of the picture so that Charles could adopt Tylee. The other reason is about religion. So basically what she's wanting to do is make sure that Joe does not come into the afterlife with her and her family. And he said that's what Joe believed was going on with Lori.
Yep.
So there's also issues about Alex, and that Joe had concerns about Alex, that he would go and get prostitutes. And Joe had a concern about Alex being around Tylee, which I don't blame him.
No, because we know that clearly Alex had some kind of a sex addiction.
Yeah.
And was just an overall creep. So we asked about Tylee, like once we got through kind of all this legal stuff, what was she like? And, you know, it's kind of a loaded question because of everything she had went through, but he said she was a regular little 4-year-old. He said when he met with her, she was pleasant and happy. She wouldn't leave Lori's side, but he said what he needed to do was actually sit down in a room separate from Lori and go through the whole thing he does to figure out stuff. And he said how he does that is through a lot of drawings with kids. He said, for instance, draw me a secret. Draw your mother and father and draw yourself somewhere in this picture. So he said after a series of these kind of activities and questions, you can get a lot of information from kids because he said he's probably the only guardian that does that or did at that time. He said a lot of time kids won't tell you, but when you ask them to draw something, they'll do it. Yeah. He said he has a whole protocol for how he goes about getting that kind of information. And so he says a lot of times I only have to ask them directly because they'll draw it out for me and then we can kind of talk about it from there. He said he really didn't get a good chance to assess Tylee thoroughly on his part. And he said, I can't do this at a park. Remember, we said earlier he met with Tylee and Lori at a park. There's people walking around, playing baseball, throwing frisbees, not to mention Lori is right there. Yeah. He said the task was pretty much impossible. So other than him just meeting up with her at that point, he said we would have set up further things, but he kept getting stalled out by them. And it was hard just being able to get with them. And Judge Livingston, who was their judge at the time, he tends to try the social work cases, and he really didn't think much of this judge's work on this case in particular. He said she did not approach it in the correct way.
So as far as the hearing goes, he tried to get with Tylee before that hearing in which he made the recommendation for full visitation, but they didn't present it to me. He said he couldn't get a hold of her. Lori went out of town that weekend. So she turned it around on him. And he says it was kind of short notice, but he sure tried to make that happen before that hearing. And he said Lori didn't want Tom to meet with Tylee. And right. I mean, that's what he said. He didn't want her to meet with him.
Right.
And he said once he got all that drawing and all that stuff that he would have known exactly what to do with it. But he just honestly felt like Vivian actually did a very good job, as she always does. With cases, he thought she was right on board and she just fizzled out at the end. But he said, it's not like I haven't been talking to her all along the way. So I know exactly what her thought processes were. He knew what she was thinking and he knew how she went about it. So he was very confident in Vivian.
Yeah. He just said he couldn't get her to come to court to testify to it. And they've always looked back and saw how things might've been different if, Joe had gotten custody. We all say that now. Would it have changed the situation? He said things like that. He said he was surprised that Alex stun-gunned Joe, mostly because he was told that Lori didn't have a good relationship with her family in general, and that Alex had embezzled a bunch of money from the family, and he was kind of the black sheep of the family. And now all of a sudden he's back in this situation. We kind of see this later on, down the line. He said, we always thought that Lori lied a lot and conjured up a lot of this stuff and putting stuff in Alex's head. And he said his head causes him to react that way. They thought that Alex was an unwitting pawn of Lori's, so he acted on the information that he was told by her. He said now for that murder up in Arizona, he was referring to Charles. He said he thinks the same kind of deal applied. He said the whole stun gun thing really freaked Joe out, and it really started getting crazy at that point. So we asked him what happened later in his career.
And go ahead.
He said he gets through this awful case. In the meantime, he's got Lori's attorney hovering over him and kind of bad-mouthing. There's some bad blood, obviously, there. And then he kind of goes and tries to reopen other cases that him and Vivian had done in the past because of the situation with Vivian's health issues. And so he starts coming to Tom's other hearings, and he's in the back of the room watching. And so at that point, Tom's case referrals drop off drastically. And so Tom decides to open up a private investigation company, and he ran his own private investigation company that specialized in family law, domestic relations, custody battles, all that stuff. He said his business did really well for several years. And he said about that time, the war was getting over and something in Iraq or Afghanistan, which one? 2007, that would have been Iraq, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And he got a lot of business from people coming home from the service. So he said he decided he needed a steady paycheck and health insurance. So he went to work for the state and was kind of a big manager for their health and mental health and their mental health program while with the state taxes. And he got out of that after about a year, and now he's over all that. He said, I work as a mental health professional for the last couple of years. So he just says he kind of sort of blames Lori's lawyer for destroying his business in a way. And in the end, Lori's lawyer stopped being paid. He actually tried to get off the case for failure to pay. The attorney or the judge kept him on the case anyway. So, so he was never thrown off the case. And he said he had to get off the case because no one would pay him. He said, you got to eat. He said, I had Lori's attorney tearing up my business on the side. He's hiring attorneys, 2 different attorneys out of his own pocket, just so he could advocate for Tylee. So we asked Tom, this is the last thing, guys, if he thought Lori knew about the kids' murders. And what was his response, Fruit Loop?
He said, sorry, I had a brain moment there.
He said nothing gets past her.
Oh, sorry, I was lost.
That's okay. I saw you look, girl. So that was the last thing we asked him. Do you think Lori knew about these murders? And he said nothing gets past her. So it was a really insightful conversation, and I felt bad because I'd specifically kind of followed some of that was a big learning moment for me as a podcaster. You don't just take what you read in groups about people associated with cases as truth. You got to investigate on your own and put fact out there. So that was a big learning moment for me, and I'm grateful to Tom Ware for not only teaching me that lesson, but telling us his story, because I think, up until last year, he was seen as a bad guy, and he really wasn't. So that's all for this episode, guys. We will see you later. We're going to talk about a few more hearings, the tasing incident, then we're going to move on from this custody battle, because we could go on and on and on. And I think you guys have kind of got a good picture at this point. All right, we'll see you soon.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.